Welcome to the Watts Wellness Podcast. My name is Corey Watts.
And my name is Sanchia Watts.
Based in Perth, Western Australia, both of us have been on our own self-development journeys for many years now, which has led to this moment.
The intention behind the Watts Wellness Podcast is to help you meet yourself deeply as you navigate your own human experience.
Become present in this moment.
Take a deep belly breath.
And be open to receiving this week's episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Watts Wellness Podcast.
Yes, today's episode is going to be on understanding your emotions or understand your emotions. As you can see in the title, it's spelled a little bit differently, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but we're keen to be here. We received a lot of love and a lot of warmth around the first episode, so we're really appreciative to all of you people that listened and supported us and wrote nice messages. So yeah, it's exciting.
It is exciting, yeah. We're really, really grateful that this is helping a lot of people already. And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being present with us. We hope that you've taken your deep breath before the episode. If you haven't, let's take one now.
I love it, yes. Yeah, ready?
I think a bit of backstory is going to be important leading into today's episode. We were supposed to film this yesterday. And it wasn't going to be on this topic. It was going to be around manifestation. But we decided to change it after we hit a few little road bumps yesterday, mainly to do with emotion, which is why Sanchia came up with the idea that we would do today on understand your emotions instead. It will lead pretty well into our strengths and our challenges because we have the same challenge. It was trying to get this podcast episode recorded yesterday. It was just a nightmare. We were both being pretty reactive, not really allowing ourselves to process the emotions we were feeling, came into the space, probably not feeling our best selves as well. And yeah, it's important because we obviously want this podcast to be a good reflection on us and we want it to reflect well to all of you. I guess like we pulled an oracle. Did you want to explain that, the oracle card? Because I think it has relevance around.
Yeah, we both just weren't feeling our best yesterday. We met some resistance and we decided to stop and walk away and come back when we were feeling a little bit less triggered and just a little bit more centered. And yeah, we pulled these oracle cards and well, the first one was divine plan. And I think that's important just to note that, you know, this is a lot bigger than us. It's not really about us. We've sort of got to get out of our egos and our own perfectionist ways of being because it's so easy to fall into that. And it's important that we're authentic in this podcast and let you guys know that we're not perfect. We obviously navigate our emotions as well. We're all human and we think it's important to talk about that today.
Yeah, the main card we got as well was mirror, and that was also what I was going to refer to, that we just felt like because we weren't showing up as ourselves, it was going to mirror a little bit onto you guys as well. And
also, like I said before we started this podcast, we were going to trigger each other. And, you know, everyone that you come into contact with, I believe, is a mirror. And if you see something in them that you don't like, it's actually mirroring back to you, something within you that you need to work on. And so both of us are constantly mirroring each other in this experience. And it happens with everyone in their own personal relationships. We're becoming more and more aware of that though. And we're able to consciously move through that as best as we can. And yeah, like we said in episode 1, we're on the journey with you guys and we're navigating it as best we can, but we've taken some deep breaths. We've expressed those emotions healthily, and now we're here to help you guys do the same.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into that today. So yeah, obviously our challenge and our strength, our challenge was around what we spoke about, and I guess the real strength is obstacles are a chance to, I guess, change your alignment. I said it at the end of last week's episode that rejection is redirection, and it's been a real positive now to be able to move into emotions and talk about that instead. So I guess we'll get into it. Sanchia, did you want to start on what emotions are? Which is a big question.
I can, yeah. I really think emotions are energy that moves through us. Emotions are just energy in motion. They're here as feedback and they show up to help us meet ourselves deeply. And we're constantly having emotions relayed back to us and we're constantly feeling and expressing things, but some of us have learnt to numb that and shut it down. And maybe that's because we felt a lot as children and we were called too sensitive and we were conditioned to think that emotions were bad. And it's important to know that emotions are here to help us understand ourselves. And it's part of the human experience, and we need to get comfortable with feeling because, like I said in episode 1, through feeling comes healing.
Which is not easy for a lot of people as well. Like, I want to make that very prominent here, is that when you're just a child and stuff, and there's that imprint period, which is where you'll learn a lot of behaviors and different things. It's where you learn off what you see and how it is. You can watch it in a lot of kids these days when they're just out and about or whatever it is. There might be a big, loud discussion going on between their parents or family members or whatever it is, and you can see the kid is really out of tune. He might be on the phone or playing with a toy, and it's sort of learning to block it out. And it's the same. That's like learnt behavior with emotions as well. It's learning to suppress and learning to not feel into it. It's just pushing it down. And we'll get into that a little bit later, what that sort of causes and what comes of it, I suppose. So no such thing as good or bad emotions. Did you want to explain that a little bit more as well?
Yeah, so I think we're conditioned to think that some emotions are bad and some are good, and it's really important for you guys to be self-reflective as you're listening to this and notice, like, do you think some emotions are bad or do you think some emotions are good? Like, just notice what your mind does when you think about different types of emotions, and then kind of go beneath that and recognize that there really is no such thing as a good or bad emotion. They're literally just energy moving through us. The only thing that's problematic or becomes challenging with emotions is when they're not expressed healthily. They're suppressed, we're disassociated, we're numbing. Then they can come out in like these huge outbursts, and we'll get into that soon. But that's the kind of emotion that people deem as bad when it's sort of unconscious and it's reactive and it's just come out in this really nasty, intense way. And that's not actually the emotion that's the issue. That's the reaction. That's
I think that is such
unconscious.
It's such an important point, because listening to you then, like, I was sort of thinking to myself, like, I'm not sure I agree with this, that there aren't like good and bad emotions. But I think when it's explained like that, I think what you're saying in terms of that, the emotion that comes of suppressing emotions, which we're going to get into later, but a lot of the time it can be rage is one of them. And there are a couple of other ones. That emotion itself probably would be labelled as bad, but you are right in saying that that emotion wouldn't occur if we learn to process our emotions and allow them to sort of pass through us.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with anger. Anger isn't a bad emotion.
Yeah, anger is a great emotion, something I'm going to talk about a bit later as well.
The problem with anger is when it's not expressed healthily and then it comes out in a rage.
Yeah.
That's when it's not ideal, obviously.
Exactly. So obviously as well, you're going to touch on this too, but different emotions carry a different sort of frequency or a vibrational level. So those emotions that are a little bit lower, like sadness and grief, they're going to carry a lower vibration, and it means that you're not vibrating very highly. When you're vibrating high, that kind of looks like joy, happiness, gratitude is another big one. So
love.
It's a little tip of wisdom as well, that gratitude is such a good way to get out of those lower emotions. Just, it's something anyone can do, and you can show at any point in your day. Just before you go to bed, like, show some gratitude towards something in your life, whether it's something good that happened today. It's something like, do you want to do that now? Like a little bit of gratitude.
One step before this, though, I agree. I absolutely agree. Gratitude is incredible. It is the fastest way to find your center again and start emanating at a higher frequency. But be careful not just to bypass those negative emotions and reach for gratitude. If you haven't felt that anger, that sadness, that grief, it's going to be really hard to feel the other side of the spectrum of gratitude and joy. So, of course, we can recognize things that we're grateful for, but just know that you can't bypass those heavier emotions. Don't shame yourself for feeling those heavier emotions. It's okay to feel them. Just allow yourself to learn how to express them consciously. But I would love to do some gratitude right now. What are you grateful for in this moment?
Grateful for this podcast right now, to be honest,
Me
and
too.
what we've established for it.
It's healing us.
It is good. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time sometimes to get going. Like, this will be the 5th take today, and yesterday obviously didn't happen. But yeah, some gratitude, I reckon, towards being able to talk about this stuff is definitely a good thing, and it is healing for us. So
Yeah.
we're on the soda water as well, and it's making me sometimes like burp up a bit, but just ignore that if you hear that. So I guess that covers off like what emotions really are, and the deep sort of crux of it, I suppose.
I feel like we're going to get deep again.
It will go deeper again, 100%. But I think the takeaway from that is really that it is just energy in motion.
Yeah.
And it's not, don't attribute so much value to what an emotion is. Don't put a title of like good and bad onto it, because all of those emotions can be felt. And once you learn to just feel into them and listen to what they're trying to tell you and what you need to get out of them, they'll start passing through your body so much easier.
Totally.
And we'll go into examples of this later.
Yeah, I just think, the example that's coming to my mind right now is like, I really want to communicate that it's okay to recognize that for your whole life you thought some emotions were bad and you're now realizing that some of them actually aren't bad. But, if you're a child and you're in the playground and you're crying and someone comes over and they call you like a suki lala, or like you're bullied in that moment, like literally, like this has probably happened to young kids and I've seen it. I was in teaching and I was a teacher's aide, and, kids kind of develop their egos and begin to shame each other for feeling. And if that happened to us, like, of course, it's only natural that we're going to like suppress our emotions and suppress our feelings because we don't want to be viewed as weak or as sook. And we're going to get into this now because this leads into stereotypes.
I was laughing at Suki Lala because I wish that was like the easiest like level that it went to, but like we'd all have experienced it goes a lot further than that.
It goes deeper, of course. That was just one example that came to mind. And
it is leading well into
your parents as well, didn't validate or express their emotions healthily, then how are you expected to know how to express your emotions?
We talk about that imprint period as well. You'll learn those behaviors as a young child, and if that's not in your environment or there's no role models that are giving you that, I guess, understanding around how to do this, it's something that then has to be learnt later on in life,
So
and it takes some work for sure.
So try and just communicate, have compassion for yourself if you're realising that your beliefs are shifting and you weren't taught this stuff earlier.
Definitely. So what Sanchia was referring to a little bit there as well is there are definitely some stereotypes and to do with masculine and feminine opinions on emotion. And we sort of wanted to go into that a little bit because it's important to understand that these stereotypes are definitely not correct when it comes to the subject of emotion. So did you want to start with the feminine side of things and some of those stereotypes? Like you'd hear it a lot of over-emotional and it's all those different things.
Yeah, so stereotyping, like, again, it comes back to our conditioning, and you see it in movies, you see it, in advertisements, you see it on TV, in a magazine. Stereotypes are everywhere and they're in our face from a really young age. And it is part of our conditioning. And once you can recognize the conditioning that's been imprinted on you, you're able to shift out of it. And like you just said, a lot of females are deemed as being over emotional or too emotional or crazy if they're expressing their emotions. And I think it's actually really difficult to articulate this without offending people. But a lot of us, I can speak from my own experience. When I was over emotional as a child, I was very sensitive, very empathetic, quite young. That was viewed as being weak. And I think a lot of women resonate with this, and it's important to recognize that those opinions other people had on your emotional state is not correct necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's an interest. Probably what comes to mind there, though, is there a line between being... Because I don't want to like dive into the stereotype here at all, but how do you know when you are like diving too much into the emotion and letting your emotions take control of you too much? Because we obviously talk about over emotional here, but how do you know when it's now actually becoming that you are just letting yourself get carried away by emotion? Because feminine is emotion. It's acting primarily out of emotion, I'm correct in saying?
Yeah. So feminine energy is obviously emotional, nurturing, sensitive, empathetic, and a whole other range of themes come under the feminine, and that's something that we'll dive into in a different episode. But I think the analogy that came to mind is, if you had a bucket of water and there was already some water in the bucket, aka some emotions are already sort of there, and exterior things begin to happen which create more emotion and begin to fill up your emotional bucket, and you're not healthily tipping out that bucket and expressing those emotions, eventually that bucket just overflows because, of course, life is going to happen and other things are going to happen that create emotional turmoil sometimes. And if you're not giving yourself the opportunity to feel, to cry, to express, to let it out, to punch it out, if you're not doing that consciously, then of course it's just going to bubble over, it's going to overflow, and that's when it's really hard to sort of regulate again, because you're just at that top level of like, wow, everything's crazy, like nothing's working. You have to come back to expressing your emotions throughout your life. Like, I cry at least once a week now, and that's been my superpower, because now when, you know, things happen that are quite intense outside of myself, I don't get as triggered and I don't have such an emotional reaction. But what do you think about that? Like, how do you navigate your emotions? Or maybe you want to talk about the stereotypes that there are around men with emotions?
I think so, yeah. I think that's probably a good direction to go. I appreciate your answer to that question, because I kind of put you on the spot a little bit there with that one. But yeah, I think stereotypes with men, like a lot of us would be pretty aware of it, that it's weak to show emotion, definitely weak to cry. Obviously, these aren't
true.
These are just the stereotypes.
Fed.
But that anger is not a good thing in a man is another stereotype, which is one that some people may be surprised to hear. But we touched on a little bit at the start of the episode, and we'll deep dive into that a little bit later. But I think as like young boys and stuff, a lot of the time we're taught to suppress our emotion. We're supposed to be tough, that masculine is supposed to be this big, strong, unemotional being
rock.
That's just going to tell everyone where we're going, what we're doing. And yeah, there's truth to that in a sense, but being actually in touch with your emotions and being able to regulate your emotions properly is not weak in a male. And especially, we're going to go into it now, and it will lead in well to what we're talking about. But regulating your emotions is allowing yourself to cry. And when you're feeling an emotion like sadness, crying is the response to alleviate that emotion. That is how you pass that through your body, is by crying. Yep. So as a male that's out there, crying is so healthy. I bawled my eyes out I think it was last Friday night, for probably 20 minutes, because I had just so much emotion, so much sadness. We obviously spoke about breath work and stuff that came up. I had a lot of, I guess, shame and stuff coming up from things in the past, and sadness was the sort of direct result of that emotion that then meant I needed to cry to get that out of my body. And I felt so good after it, being able to do that and express that. So learning to regulate your emotions is so important to break those stereotypes for males especially.
And I think in order to do that is, Eckhart Tolle says that you shouldn't really ask, well, you can ask yourself, like, how are you feeling? But a way to go deeper is to just ask yourself, what are you resisting? Like, what are you resisting in this moment? And that's going to show you what is creating a bit of angst or stress or frustration within you. And if that resistance is something that's outside of your control, you have to surrender it and let it go. If it's within your control, then take, that aligned action to make some changes. But I think for some people, it's really hard for them to just ask themselves, like, okay, how am I feeling? What am I feeling? Like, some people just go blank on that because they've learned to suppress and disassociate for so long. So it's really important to just ask yourself, what are you resisting? So maybe you guys could do that right now, like take a deep breath and just see, what are you resisting in this moment? And it could be as simple as like the car in front of you keeps braking too far apart from the car in front of them. Like, it could be so small. And then as soon as you recognize that you're resisting that, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't really make any sense. So I'm going to breathe that out, let it go. The breath is everything.
How do you identify out of emotion? Like, how do you identify the emotion you're feeling by doing that way of thinking?
Well, that's a great question. Emotions show up in the body. When I'm feeling frustrated, my shoulders are up high, I'm tense, my jaw might be clenched.
To the individual, obviously.
Just to whatever's going on outside of
I mean, like,
me.
It's different to the individual. Like, everyone holds it differently in their body.
Yeah.
So I'm probably asking...
Everyone holds it differently.
Out of asking yourself, what am I resisting? How do I then identify the emotion that's coming up from that?
Well, that's going to be subjective to whatever the person's going through. Like, if you're feeling tense, obviously you're going to maybe have some physiological symptoms of shoulders up high, maybe a clenched jaw, or maybe it's just this in a feeling in your chest of anxiety, where things feel a bit tight, like this is why it's important to begin that process of checking in with yourself daily and what you're feeling, because then you'll be able to recognize what emotions are associated with your physiological responses.
Yeah. So I think that's what I'm sort of trying to get at there. Is I think there's a step before changing your thinking around what am I resisting. And one of the good ways of doing that is to simply, when you're feeling a sense of overwhelmed or there's discomfort in your body or whatever it is, however you sometimes feel emotion, take a moment to sit down. And this should be uncomfortable. Like, this isn't supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be something of like, trust me, we're going to talk about it a little bit later with anxiety. And I've been someone that's been through that a lot. But sitting down in your emotions when you're feeling them to their highest extent is so hard. But once you can do that and you can close your eyes and you can just start taking some deep breaths and actually, even massage the area that it is that you're feeling this discomfort. One, you're going to alleviate it by probably about 50%. That's scientifically proven to be a great remedy for that, is breathing into that emotion. But two, you're going to be able to identify what it is and what that is within your body. And then once you do that, what Sanchia's talking about there with the what are you resisting question is a great link to understand maybe why that emotion is occurring in your body the way it is as well. So then when we talk about regulating, it's around what I said before for sadness, it's about crying. For anger, go grab a pillow, scream into your pillow at the top of your lungs, beat the crap out of your pillow on your bed, or let your anger out. This is why anger is such a good emotion to have.
It is, but it just needs to be channeled in the correct way.
But anger is a primitive response to tell someone that they've crossed a boundary with you, to identify that something isn't working for you and to be angry about it so it stops happening. That is the idea of anger. We obviously spoke around rage is going to occur when you're suppressing anger or you're suppressing other emotions. And it's because you're not regulating. And then after a while, as Sanchia said, that bucket starts getting so full that it tips over and it is just... Unconscious. It's just flowing everywhere. You can't even control what's happening. And to be honest, like, I was probably in that state a little bit yesterday as well without regulating. So it can happen to any of us. It's not an easy thing to check in with and do.
And that's why a lot of us avoid it, because it's hard to do it. Like, it's easier just to avoid your emotions, push them under the rug, not express them, not talk about them, and just move on with life. 100%. And I think that's such an outdated way of thinking, honestly. Like, you're not going to get anywhere and you're going to find it really hard to find the alignment in your life if you're constantly just sweeping things under the rug.
Yeah.
You need to feel your emotions. It's actually so important. It's really coming through now how important this is.
Yeah.
If you want to have conscious, healthy relationships, learn how to feel your emotions.
Yeah, most definitely. You want to go from being unconsciously incompetent to being consciously competent.
Yeah.
And that's such a big step because there's things in between there that need to happen. But if you can get that happening in your life, especially when it comes to regulating your emotions, it is going to make a world of difference to your well-being and how you feel, how do you react to certain situations, how you show up. It's just everything.
I really like the idea of massaging the area that you feel the emotion in. Like, that's something I haven't done in a really long time, actually.
Yeah, no, it's a great way while breathing. And, I do want to add, like, if this is something that is hard for you or isn't resonating at the moment, it is something we want to offer with our coaching stuff on whatswellness.com. But learning to be able to regulate emotions and, as you said, massage that area, because it helps to it helps to normalize it in the body. That's essentially what you were doing here when you're dropping into these emotions. Alchemizing, normalizing. You're sitting in it and just like actually realizing this is natural. Everyone has these emotions.
If you're new to this, like, check out the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Joe Dispenza. The body really does store everything. For women, we store a lot of emotion in our hips. So if your hip flexors are really tight, try a child's pose, do a reclined butterfly pose, and that will really help you to open up the fascia that's in that area to help you have a healthy release of emotion.
Yeah, most definitely.
Back pain as well. If you've got back pain, there's probably some unexpressed emotion in there too.
For sure. If there were any emotions, we obviously mainly just covered off then on anger, sadness, and what was the other one we covered off on?
Mostly
We mostly covered off
Mostly
on them.
Angus and
if
sadness.
if you do have an emotion at the moment that you're not sure how to process, please hit us up on Instagram via a DM or via our email. Get in touch and we'll be able to share some thoughts on getting that like through the body and how to process that accordingly. The one that I did want to touch on quickly was anxiety, because it's such, I think...
I wouldn't go quickly. Just talk about it.
Let's talk about
Go
it. Yeah.
slow.
A
Let's
bit of
do it.
anxiety and stuff. Because I think it's such a common thing these days in, sadly, the world we live in, and with how much distraction there is and how not present we are.
So overstimulated.
So overstimulated. It makes anxiety such a prominent thing in everyone's lives at the moment. So
I've definitely experienced it too.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah,
So
take the room, bro.
yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, anxiety is one of those emotions that is so hard to sit in, because when you're freaking out, you start freaking out about freaking out, and it almost, you just want to run, like get away from that feeling out of your body. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel nice. It's something that you don't want to be there. So what we're talking about with regulating and actually sitting in the motion and facing it and normalizing it is the best response that you can take towards helping your anxiety. Being able to sit and actually just accept like what's going on that's not a part of you. It's, as Sanchia said, it's a lot of The Power of Now, that the book that you recommended before. So if you did want some more information on it, read that.
By Eckhart Tolle.
Read it a couple of times, because it may not land straight away. But also look deeper into your anxiety, because a lot of the time as well, there's another emotion behind it, whether that is sadness or shame, or there's a couple of other ones as well that you might want to touch on in a second. But often when you can then start breathing into your emotions and breathing into that anxiety wherever it is, for me, a lot of the time I feel it in my chest or in my stomach or my sternum. Sometimes I feel it in my legs. Once I start to just massage that and actually breathe into it for a few seconds, I can then a lot of the time start to move into, okay, like why is this like coming up the way it is? What is it that's going on? What am I feeling sad about, stressed about? What is it that's coming up? And once you can identify that, you'll notice such a drop within yourself of that anxiety level, because it's normalizing it. Anxiety at the end of the day is a fight or flight response to danger. And when your anxiety is out of control, it means that that response is just going off the charts. It means your body constantly feels like it's in danger. So you need to reassure yourself that you're not in danger. Like, you're in a safe space. Obviously, if that's not the case, you need to change your environment to make sure that that's happening for you. But a lot of the time, like my anxiety would come up just sitting in a chair like this or whatever it is. And you've got to realize, like, there's nothing actually going on here. Like, drop in and, like, reassure yourself of, like, it's all okay. Did you want to add some stuff onto that?
Yeah, I mean, anxiety for me shows up in the chest as well. And breathing has changed my life, like conscious, connected breath work. And that 4-4-4 tattoo you've got on your thumb there, like the box breathing method, if you haven't learnt that one, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, then you hold at the bottom for 4 seconds. And you go around in a box and you just keep with that breath work. That will just regulate and slow everything down so much. It's a very easy way just to like regulate your emotional state. But sometimes anxiety will show up and you don't even know why it's there. And, you know, obviously deep down, there's always going to be some subconscious level programming that has caused it to show up. And maybe it's almost a learnt response now to be anxious. And that's why it's important to find those modalities and those things that help you to regulate and slow down and just feel it, breathe into it, exhale it out, know that you are safe, and you know that like your anxiety is valid. Don't hate on your anxiety. It's there to try and keep you safe. And like, it's okay to have anxiety. Just feel your way through it with all emotions.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I want to add as well is that if this doesn't come first time, or you really struggle with this and it's not easy or whatever it is also worth mentioning that for different people, like, stuff's going to work differently. Like, as much as that is a little bit of a universal way of calming that stuff down and overcoming it, there will be times for people that that doesn't work or it doesn't resonate, and that is totally fine. Whatever your approach is to regulating your emotions and helping yourself feel good, that's important for you as well. So I just want to make that clear for everyone out there, that we're not telling you hard and fast that this is for you or this is exactly what you need to do and cure all emotions. Like, that's not what we're getting at. It's just some simple advice here to take on board and work out what works for you. Because for for some people, it's medication. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's taking an ice bath in the morning. I know that's been a good one for me. That's actually really helped with my anxiety and calming myself down. But yeah, you've got to work out the balance for you. But I can guarantee that one that will always be useful is just dropping into yourself and learning to identify the emotions and take the scariness away from them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because doing this as well allows us to then enjoy the happy emotions or
For sure.
the nice emotions are emotions, but those warmer, lighter emotions and those higher frequency emotions, that's when you're going to be able to enjoy that a lot more. And I think I said it in the last episode that drop into those good ones as well. Take different points for that day. It's not about just dropping in all the time when it's a lower vibration. Drop in when it's high and familiarize yourself with how it feels to feel good. And that's such an important one.
Yeah.
It will take time to get the dark emotions first, but once you get that, you can get into the light.
Yeah, I always say to people, if you haven't given yourself the chance to feel the heavier emotions, you're really going to struggle to feel the higher emotions. You know, those heavier, dense emotions of grief, sadness, anxiety, depression, hatred, like feeling those emotions and working your way through them will allow you to then be able to really feel what it's like to have joy and love and happiness and peace in your life. You have to get comfortable feeling both ends of the spectrum. I actually say to people as well, if they aren't feeling safe in their body, it's actually going to be really hard for you to meditate and to do breath work and things like that. Like if you're not feeling safe in your body, it's really hard for you to lie down at a sound healing and fully let go. So create safety in the body by maybe shaking the body, like doing those somatic experiences where you shake the body or you run or you do some boxing, like shake it out, get it out of the system. If you look at animals when they're in that stress,
Literally just about to touch on this.
Wow, I heard that. When you're watching animals and they've just had a fight.
Tigers a lot of the time.
Birds.
Watch up like a David Attenborough documentary on lions or something like that.
Ducks as well.
And after they have that big fight, that back leg, the way it shakes out, that's shaking out emotion.
Yeah.
And like the intensity of a chase or a hunt.
Yeah, like if you watch ducks, like they'll shake their feathers. Swans, when they've just been scared, like they'll shake their feathers and they shake it off. And that's how you regulate your emotion. So get used to shaking, get used to breathing it out. And then once you're feeling safe because you've shifted it physiologically and you've regulated your nervous system by letting it go physically, you'll be able to actually breathe and be still.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, at the end of the day, that's why we're doing this. We want to be able to respond consciously and mindfully to people. And that's really the end goal of being able to regulate. So you can show up as your best self, not as someone that's going to just be an outpour of emotion because you haven't been regulating your emotions well. Like
literally just before when we were also having some technical difficulties today, I went out the back room and I was like, I actually just need to shake it off. Like I need to shake this off because I'm feeling that tense frustration and I'm feeling the stress coming up and I just need to shake it out and shake it off. And then it worked.
my voice right now probably sounds a little bit husky, and it's because like when this all wasn't happening, I went out to the car and just screamed so loud, just yelling. To get anger out of my body, like to get it out so I could sit back down and be, more conscious and not have this underlying anger behind me.
It's frustrating when things don't work, and give yourself permission to feel them. We're not perfect. We're going to feel these things. Nothing's ever going to go perfectly in life. You're allowed to feel the frustration behind it and then shake it off, scream it out, and then you're able to move on.
So important.
It's so important. It's
sure.
so important. Another thing as well that I've learned that's really changed my life is you can't be grateful and anxious at the same time. Did you know that?
Didn't know that. I see.
You struggle with this concept. I think it's amazing. I obviously don't get that really, really intense anxiety anymore where I'm on the verge of panic attacks. But when I am starting to feel a little bit of anxiety coming up, it's like, okay, no, what am I grateful for? And it pulls me back into the present moment. And it's like, I'm actually really grateful for that beautiful tree right there. Like that is such a beautiful frangipani tree. And that automatically gets rid of the anxiety for me.
Yeah.
So try that. It might work for you, might not.
For sure.
But it worked for me.
No, I agree. I think when you're at that heightened space, it's like pour me a little bit. So it's hard to express gratitude because you're feeling so gloomy for yourself. It's part of the reason why there's anxiousness there, in a sense. So
When you're at that really intense level of
Yeah,
anxiety,
exactly.
you're feeling like, wow,
Yeah.
what is wrong with me?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
and it just feels like, ugh, like
That's shame.
Yeah. So that's why you need to, get yourself calmed down. And then I think what Sanchia's saying is a good point. Like gratitude is such a big one to be able to regulate. But
Do you know the difference between shame and guilt?
yeah. But do you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, I do. You read my mind.
Yeah, nice.
I just think it's important for people to know how to break up shame and guilt because, like, they kind of sound similar, but they're different. So shame is internal, and shame is the belief that I am bad. Whereas guilt is external and it's based on an action and the thought of I did something bad. And so shame is internalized and it's one of the lowest frequency emotions that there are. And a lot of us have shame deep down. A lot of us feel shame for different reasons. And
Do you know how to regulate it?
I do, but the reason why we feel shame is because we're empathetic. So this comes from Brene Brown. You can't feel shame if you don't have empathy. So this is kind of a superpower. Your empathy is a superpower because it helps you to help others and it allows you to feel so deeply, which is a gift. It's a gift to feel. And the only people that don't have shame are sociopaths that have no empathy. So just know that your shame is there because you're an empathetic being and that's okay. It's just learning how to regulate the shame and learning how to notice when that guilt is showing up and not being self-critical and coming back to compassion is a really good way to navigate your way through it. But how would you regulate shame and guilt?
Pretty much like the best way to regulate both those emotions is to share it.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable is what allows you to then pass that on. So when you be vulnerable, it's a superpower as well. Like a lot of people think being vulnerable like makes me like susceptible, but if anything, it takes away the power from other people because
Totally.
when you express the shame around an emotion or whatever it is, it's out there now. There's no more reason to carry it because you've put it out there. Everyone knows, like whoever it is you've told. Like it's a hard one and it takes a lot of courage to do it. It's why it is such a dark emotion because it carries a lot of weight and a lot of heaviness within the body. But when you can take shame and you can share it with someone, that cuts it in half.
It does.
And funnily enough, like our dad always used to say, a problem shared is a problem halved. And that's the same with shame, I suppose. When you can share shame and guilt, it then takes it away. Like it's alleviating.
It does. Brene Brown also talks about this. Like shame thrives in secrecy. If you want to stay in that shameful state, don't tell anyone, don't talk to anyone about it. That's just going to put you in contraction and it allows that shame just to brew and bubble. As soon as you share it and you're vulnerable and you're authentic, wow, it's a huge weight off. It is so important to speak and it takes a lot of strength to actually be vulnerable, like you said.
Yeah.
It takes so much courage to feel and to express these things. And that is why this whole belief around like it's weak to speak is just so false.
Yeah.
It's a complete fallacy because it takes triple, if not quadruple, times 100% more strength to express yourself and your emotions than it does to just brush them aside.
100%. It's such a big one. Like that's the thing with emotion. Like, and I'm glad it's the episode that we've covered off today because there are so many other things now that we're probably going to talk about in later episodes. There's stuff we haven't touched on today that are so relevant to your emotions. We spoke a little bit about it, but living in the present is one that we
So
will
important.
definitely cover off in the future. Surrendering is another one that comes to mind with emotion as well. So yeah, it's been a really good one to sort of go through this and lay the foundation for you guys. So when we speak about this in later episodes, there's some understanding there. And yeah, get excited for what we're going to bring to you guys coming up.
Yeah. Another beautiful way just to express emotion and get it out of the body is obviously you want to share these things with people that you trust. But if you're struggling to do that, just start with the journal. No one else is going to read it but you. If you can start to journal those emotions down onto a piece of paper, wow, that's going to shift a lot for you as well.
So that does lead very well into our little takeaway for this week, which is going to be checking in daily with your heart and how you're feeling. Did you want to lead on with this?
If that's challenging, ask yourself that question, what am I resisting?
Yeah.
And then the journal prompt for everybody is to just write about your feelings, honestly. If you can do that daily, just what did you feel today?
Yeah. And just get into it.
You'll meet yourself so deeply. You'll create self-trust because you're creating that awareness of what you're feeling and you're validating your experience. And then that creates the self-love. You said this in the last episode.
I know I did.
We have slightly different opinions on self-love and self-trust, but I think self-trust is a step to self-love.
It's not as much self-trust, but it's just, for me, self-love is just, it's such a hard point to get to.
I'm not saying they're going to obtain it, but they're going to slowly get their way there.
So aim for self-acceptance.
Yeah.
And then aim for self-fondness.
Accept your emotions.
To get self-acceptance.
Break down self-fondness. That sounds funny. What's that?
Self-fondness is not quite self-love, but it's more than just self-acceptance. Like, you do like some parts of yourself, but there are still parts that you want to improve. Self-love is like complete, I love every part of myself. There's nothing I would improve, which is why most people will never attain that goal of self-love. But it is a nice title to obviously give, like, love yourself and all that, but it can be quite hard. So that's my sort of view on the point. I know we view it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's okay.
That's part of the podcast.
I still think that you should be able to, feel your emotions, create self-trust, and eventually, hopefully, you'll get closer to self-love than ever before.
Shoot for the stars, and if you miss, you'll land on the moon, which is self-fondness.
That's so gaudy.
Yeah, I love it. Guys, this has been episode 2. We are so glad to have been able to share, understand your emotions. We hope that there's been some takeaways. As I mentioned before, if there was an emotion that we didn't talk about today on how to regulate, hit us up on our Instagram or via email. And if there were any other questions or any other thoughts that you had on today's episode, feel free to jump back in and, get talking on the conversation.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Continue to feel your emotions, continue to journal, and we will see you all in divine timing.
Episode 3, here we come.
Woohoo.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.